Hello, everyone, and we are back with Lord Dunsany and Time and the Gods. So, this installment structure will be a bit different since Lord Dunsany did mostly short stories. We will see what we can get through in about 30 minutes. We are starting off with The Coming of the Sea. Once there was no sea, and the gods went walking over the green plains of earth. Upon an evening of the forgotten years, the gods were seated on the hills, and all the little rivers of the world lay coiled at their fat feet asleep. When Slid, the new god, striding through the stars, came suddenly upon earth, lying in a corner of space, and behind Slid there marched a million waves, all following Slid and tramping up the twilight. And Slid touched earth in one of her great green valleys that divided the south, and here he encamped for the night, with all his waves about him. But to the gods, as they sat upon their hilltops, a new cry came crying over the green spaces that lay below the hills, and the god said, "This is neither the cry of life, nor yet the whisper of death. Was this new cry that the gods have never commanded, yet which comes to the ears of the gods?" And the gods together, shouting, made the cry of the south, calling the south wind to them. Again the gods shouted all together, making the cry of the north, calling the north wind to them. And thus they gathered to them all their winds and sent these four down into the low plains to find what thing it was that called with the new cry, and to drive it away from the gods. Then all the winds harnessed up their clouds and drave forth till they came to the great green valley that divides the south in twain, and there found Slid with all his waves about him. Then for a space Slid and the four winds struggled with one another till the strength of the winds was gone, and they limped back to the gods their masters and said, "We have met this new thing that has come upon the earth, and have striven against its armies, but could not drive them forth, and the new thing is beautiful, but very angry as creeping towards the gods." But Sliv advanced and led his armies up the valley, and inch by inch and mile by mile he conquered the lands of the gods. Then from their hills the gods sent down a great array of cliffs against hard red rocks, and bade them march against Slid. And the cliffs marched down till they came and stood before Slid, and leaned their heads forward, and frowned, and stood staunch to guard the lands of the gods against the might of the sea, shutting Slid off from the world. Then Slid sent some of his smaller waves to search out what stood against him, and the cliffs shattered them. But Slid went back and gathered together a horde of his greatest waves, and hurled them against the cliffs, and the cliffs shattered them. And again Slid called upon out of his deep a mighty array of waves, and sent them roaring against the guardians of the gods, and the red rocks frowned and smote them. And once again Slid gathered his greater waves and hurled them against the cliffs, and when the waves were scared like those before them, the feet of the cliffs were no longer standing firm, and their faces were scarred and battered. Then into every cleft that stood in the rock Slid sent his hugest wave, and others fall behind it, and Slid himself seized hold of huge rocks with his claws and tore them down, and stamped them under his feet. And when the tumult was over, the sea had won, and over the broken remnants of those red cliffs, the armies of Slid marched on, and up the long green valley. Then the gods heard Slid exulting far away and singing songs of triumph over their battered cliffs, and ever the tramp of his armies sounded nearer and nearer in the listening ears of the gods. Then the gods called to their downlands to save their world from Slid, and the downlands gathered themselves and marched away a great white line of gleaming cliffs and halted before Slid. Then Slid advanced no more and lulled his legions, and while his waves were low, he softly crooned a song such as once long ago had troubled the stars and brought down the tears out of the twilight. Sternly the white cliffs stood on guard to save the world of the gods, but the song that once had troubled the stars went moaning on awakening pent desires, till full at the feet of the gods the melody fell. Then the blue rivers that lay curled asleep opened their gleaming eyes, uncurled themselves, and shook their rushes, and making stir among the hills crept down to find the sea, and passing across the world, they came at last to where the white cliffs stood, and coming behind them, split them here and there, and went through their broken ranks to Slid at last. And the gods were angry with their traitorous streams. Then Slid ceased from singing the song that rules the world, and gathered up his legions, and the rivers lifted up their heads with the waves, and all went marching on to sail the cliffs of the gods. And wherever the river had broken the ranks of the cliffs, Slid armies went surging in and broke them up into islands, and shattered the islands away. And the gods on their hilltops heard once more the voice of Slid exulting over their cliffs. Already more than half the world lay subject to Slid, and still his armies advance. And the people of Slid, the fishes and the long eels, went in and out of arbors that were once dear to the gods. Then the gods feared for their dominion, and to the innermost sacred recesses of the mountains, to their very heart of the hills, the gods trooped off together, and there found Tintagon, a mountain of black marble, staring far over the earth, and spake thus to him with the voices of the gods. O eldest born of our mountains, when first we devised the earth, we made thee, and thereafter fashioned fields and hollows, valleys and other hills to lie about thy feet. And now, Tintagon, thy ancient lords, the gods, are facing a new thing, which overthrows the old. Go, therefore, thou Tintagon, and stand up against Slid, that the gods be still the gods, and the earth still be green. And hearing the voice of his sires, the elder gods, Tintagon, strode down through the evening, leaving a wake of twilight broad behind him as he strode, and going across the green earth came down to Ambrity at the valley's edge, and there met the foremost of Slid's fierce armies conquering the world. And against him Slid hurled the forces of a whole bay, which lashed itself high over Tintagon's knees, and streamed across his flanks, and then fell and was lost. Tintagon still stood firm for the honor and dominion of his lords, the elder gods. Then Slid went to Tintagon and said, Let's now make a truce. Stand thou back from Ambrity, and let me pass through thy ranks, that mine armies may now pass up the valley which opens on the world, that the green earth that dreams around the feet of the older gods shall know the new god Slid. Then shall mine army strive with thee no more, and thou and I shall be the equal lords of the whole earth. When all the world is singing the chaunt of Slid, and thy head alone shall be lifted above mine armies when rival hills are dead, and I will deck thee with all the robes of the sea, and all the plunder that I have taken in rare cities shall be piled before thy feet. Tentagon, I have conquered all the stars, my song swells through all the spaces besides. I come victorious from Mon and Congot on the furthest edge of the worlds. And thou and I are to be equal lords when the old gods are gone, and the green earth knoweth slid. Behold my gleaming azure, and fair with 1,000 smiles, and swayed by 1,000 moods. And Titagon answer, I am staunch and black, and have one mood, and this to defend my masters, and their green earth. Then Slid went backward, growling, and summoned together the waves of a whole sea, and sent them singing full in Titagon's face. Then from Tintaggon's marble front the sea fell backwards, crying onto a broken shore, and ripple by ripple straggled back to Slitzing Tintaggon stands. Far out beyond the battered shore that lay at Tintaggon's feet, Slid rested long and sent the Nautilus to drift up and down before Tintaggon's eye, and he and his armies sat singing idle songs of dreamy islands far away to the south, and of the still stars once they had stolen forth, of twilight evening and of long ago. Still Titagon stood, with his feet planted fair upon the valley's edge, defending the gods and their green earth against the sea. And all the while that Slid sang his songs and played with the Nautilus that sailed up and down, he gathered his oceans together. One morning, as Slid sang of old outrageous wars, and of most enchanting peace, and of dreamy islands, and the south wind and the sun, he suddenly launched 5 oceans out of all the deep, all to attack Tentagon. And the 5 oceans sprang upon Tentagon and passed above his head. One by one the grip of the oceans loosened, one by one they fell back into the deep, and still Tentagon stood. And on that morning the might of all 5 oceans lay dead at Tentagon's feet. That which Slid had conquered he still held, and there is now no longer a great green valley in the south. But all that Tentagon had guarded against Slid he gave back to the gods. Very calm the sea lies now about Tentagon's feet, where he stands all black amid crumbled white of cliffs of white, with red rocks piled about his feet. And often the sea retreats far out along the shore, and often wave by wave comes marching in with the sound of the tramping of armies, that all may still remember the great fight that surged about Tentagon once, and when he guarded the gods and the green earth against Slid. Sometimes in their dreams, the war-scarred warriors of Slid still lift their heads and cry their battle cry. Then do dark clouds gather about Tentagon's swarthy brow, and he stands out menacing, seen after by ships where once he conquered Slid. And the gods know well that while Tentagon stands, they and their world are safe, and whether Slid shall one day smite Tentagon is hidden among the secrets of the sea. The next story is A Legend of the Dawn. When the worlds and all began, the gods were stern and old, and they saw the beginning from under eyebrows hoar with years, all but Izana, their child, who played with the golden ball. Izana was a child of all the gods, and the law before the beginning and thereafter was that all should obey the gods. Yet hither and thither went all Pegana's gods to obey, and the Dawnchild because she loved to be obeyed. It was dark and all over the world, and even Pegana, where dwell the gods, it was dark when the child Izana the Dawn first found her golden ball. Then running down the stairway of the gods, with tripping feet, Chalcedony, Onyx, Chalcedony, Onyx, step by step, she cast her golden ball across the sky. The golden ball went bounding up the sky, and the Dawnchild, with her flaring hair, stood laughing upon the stairway of the gods. And it was day. So gleaming fields below saw the first of all the days that the gods have destined. But towards evening certain mountains, afar and aloof, conspired together to stand between the world and the golden ball, and to wrap their crags about it, and to shut it from the world. And all the world was darkened with their plot. And the Dawnchild up and Pegana cried for a golden ball. Then all the gods came down the stairway right to Pegana's seat to see what ailed the Dawnchild, and ask her why she cried. Then Zana said that her golden ball had been taken away and hidden by the mountains, black and ugly, far away from Pegana. A world of rock under the rim of the sky, and she wanted her golden ball and could not love the dark. Thereat Umberon, whose hound was the thunder, took his hound and leash and strode away across the sky after the golden ball until he came to the mountain afar and aloof. There did the thunder put his nose to the rocks and bay along the valleys, and fast at his heel followed Umberon. And the nearer the hound the thunder came to the golden ball, the louder did he bay. But haughty and silent stood the mountains, whose plot had darkened the world. All in the dark among the crags and mighty cavern guarded by two twin peaks, at the last they found the golden ball, for which the Dawnchild wept. Then under the world went Umbridum, with his thunder panting behind him, and came in the dark before the morning from underneath the world, and gave the Dawnchild back her golden ball, and Izana laughed and took in her hands, and Umbridum went back into Pegana, and at its threshold the thunder went to sleep. Again the Dawnchild tossed the golden ball far up into the blue across the sky, and the second morning shone upon the world, and on lakes and oceans, and on drops of dew. But as the ball went bounding on its way, the prowling mists and the rain conspired together, and took it and wrapped it in their tattered cloaks, and carried it away. And through the rents in their garments gleamed the golden ball, but they held it fast and carried it right away underneath the world. Then on an onyx step Izana sat down and wept. Who could no more be happy without her golden ball? And again the gods were sorry, and the south wind came to tell her tales of most enchanted islands, to whom she listened not, nor yet to the tales of temples in lone lands that the east wind told her, who had stood beside her when she flung her golden ball. But from far away the west wind came with news of three great travelers wrapped around with battered cloaks that carried away between them a golden ball. Then up leapt the north wind, who guards the pole, and drew a sword of ice out of his scabbard of snow, and sped away along the roads that leads across the blue. And in the darkness underneath the world he met the three great travelers, and rushed upon them, and drove them far before him, smiting them with his sword, till their great cloaks streamed with blood. And out of the midst of them, as they fled, with flapping cloaks all red and grey and tattered, he leapt up with a golden ball, and gave it to the Dawnchild. Again, Inzana tossed the ball into the sky, making the third day, and up it went and fell towards the fields. And as Izana stood to pick up, she suddenly heard the singing of all the birds that were. All the birds in the world were singing all together, and also all the streams. And Izana sat and listened and thought of no golden ball, nor ever of Chalcedony and onyx, nor of all her fathers the gods, but only of all the birds. Then in the woods and meadows where they had all suddenly sung, they suddenly ceased, and Zana looked up and found that her ball was lost, and all alone in the stillness one owl laughed. When the gods heard Izana crying for a ball, they clustered together on the threshold and peered into the dark, but saw no golden ball, and leaning forward they cried out to the bat as he passed up and down, Bat, that seizes all things, where is the golden ball? And though the bat answered, none heard, and none of the winds had seen it, nor any of the birds. And there was only the eyes of the gods in the darkness peering for the golden ball. Then the god said, Thou hast lost thy golden ball, and they made her a moon of silver to roll about the sky. And the child cried and threw it upon the stairway and chipped and broke its edges and asked for the golden ball. Leaping Tongue, the lord of music, who was least of all the gods, because the child cried still for a golden ball, stole out of Pegana and crept across the sky, and found the birds of all the world sitting in trees and ivories and whispering in the dark. He asked them one by one for news of the golden ball. Some had last seen it on a neighboring hill, and others in trees, and though none of them knew where it was, a heron had seen it lying in a pond. But a wild duck in some reeds had seen it last as she came home across the hills, and then it was rolling very far away. At last the cock cried out that he had seen it lying beneath the world. There Limpington sought it out, and the cock called to him through the darkness as he went, until at last he found the golden ball. Then Limpington went up and into Pegana and gave it to the dawn child, who played it with the moon no more. And the cock and all the tribes called out, We found it! We found the golden ball! Again Izana tossed the ball afar, laughing with joy to see it, her hand stretched upwards, her golden hair afloat, and carefully she watched as it fell. But alas, it fell with a splash into the great sea, and gleamed and shimmered as it fell till the waters became dark above it and could be seen no more. And men on the world said, How the dew has fallen, how the mist seas set in with breezes from the streams. But this dew was the tears of the dawn child, and the mists were her sighs when she said, There will no more come a time when I play with my ball again, for now it is lost forever. And the gods tried to comfort Izana as she played with her silver moon, but she would not hear them, and went in tears to Slid, where he played with gleaming sails, and in his mighty treasure turned over gems and pearls, and lorded over the sea, and said, O Slid, whose soul is the sea, bring back my golden ball. And Slid stood up, swarthy and clad in seaweed, and mightily dived from the last Chalcedony step out of Pegana's threshold straight into the sea. There on the sand among the battered navies of the Nautilus and broken weapons of the swordfish, hidden by dark wire, he found the golden ball, and coming up in the night, all green and dripping, he carried it, gleaming, to the stairway of the gods, and brought it back to Izana from the sea. And out of the hands of Slid she took it and tossed it far and wide over his sails and seas, and far away shone on land that knew not Slid till it came to its zenith and dropped towards the world. Barifel the eclipse dashed out from his hiding and rushed at the golden ball and seized it in his jaws. When Zana saw the eclipse bearing her plaything away, she cried aloud to the thunder, who burst from Pegana and fell howling upon the throat of the eclipse, who dropped the golden ball and let it fall towards earth. But the black mountains disguised themselves with snow. As the golden ball fell down towards them, they turned their peaks to ruby crimson and their lakes to sapphires. Gleaming amongst silver, as Anna saw a jeweled casket into which her plaything fell, but when she stooped to pick up again, she found no jeweled casket with rubies, silver, or sapphires, but only wicked mountains disguised in snow that had trapped her golden ball. And then she cried because there was none to find it, for thunder was far away chasing the eclipse, and all the gods lamented when they saw her sorrow. And Limpentung, who was least of all the gods, was yet the saddest at the dawn child's grief. And when the god said, "Play with your silver moon," he stepped lightly from the rest and, coming down the stairway of the gods, playing an instrument of music, went out towards the world to find the golden ball because Azana wept. And to the world he went till he came to the nether cliffs that stands by the inner mountains in the soul and heart of the earth, where the earthquake dwelt alone, asleep but astir as he sleeps, breathing and moving his legs and grunting aloud in the dark. Then in the ear of the earthquake, limping tongue said a word that only the gods may say, and the earthquake startled to his feet and flung the cave away, the cave wherein he slept between the cliffs, and shook himself and went galloping abroad, and overturned the mountains that hid the golden ball, and bit the earth beneath them, and hurled their crags about, and covered himself with rocks and fallen hills, and went back ravening and growling into the soul of the earth, and there lay down and slept again for 100 years. And the golden ball rolled free, passing underneath the shattered earth, and so rolled back to Pegana, and Limpington came home to the onyx step and took the dawn child by the hand, and told not what he had done, but said it was the earthquake, and went away to sit at the feet of the gods. Bezana went and patted the earthquake on the head, for she said it was dark and lonely in the soul of the earth. Thereafter, returning step by step, Chalcedony onyx, up the stairway of the gods, she cast again her golden ball from the threshold afar into the blue, to gladden the world and the sky, and laughed to see it go. And far away, Trogul, upon the utter rim, turned a page that was number 6 in a cipher that none might read. And as the golden ball went through the sky to gleam on lands and seas, there came the fog towards it, stooping as he walked, with his dark brown cloak about him. And behind him slunk the night, and as the golden ball rolled past the fog, suddenly night snarled and sprang upon it and carried it away. Hastily Izana gathered the gods and said, "The night hath seized my golden ball, and no god alone can find it now, for none can say how far the night may roam, who prowls all round us and out beyond the worlds." At the entreaty of their dawn child, and all the gods made themselves stars for torches, and far away through all the sky followed the tracks of night, as far as he prowled abroad, and at one time slid with with a Pleiades in his hand, came nigh to the golden ball, and at another Yalhanth holding Orion for a torch, but lastly Limpentung, bearing the morning star, found the golden ball far away under the world, near the lair of night. And all the gods together seized the ball, and night turning smote out the torches of the gods, and thereafter slunk away. And all the gods in triumph marched up the gleaming stairway of the gods, all praising Lil Limping Tongue, who through the chase had fallen out so close in search of the golden ball. Then far below on the world a human child cried out to the dawn child for the golden ball, as Anna ceased from her play that illuminated the world and sky, and cast the ball from the threshold of the gods to the little human child that played in the fields below and would one day die. And the child played all day along the golden ball, down in the little fields where the humans lived, and went to bed at evening and put beneath his pillow and went to sleep, and no one worked in all the world because the child was playing. And the light of the golden ball streamed up from under the pillow and out through the half-shut door, and shone in the western sky. And Yorhanth Lahai in the night time tiptoed into the room and took the ball gently, for he was a god, away from the under the pillow and brought back to the dawn child to gleam on the onyx step. But some day night shall seize the golden ball and carry it right away and drag it down to his lair, and Slid shall dive from the threshold into the sea to see if it be there, and coming up when the fishermen draw their nets, and shall find it not, nor yet discover among the sails. Limping Tongue shall seek among the birds, and shall not find it when the cock is mute, and up the valley shall go Umbrodun to seek among the crags, and the hound the thunder shall chase the eclipse, and all the gods go seeking with their stars, but never find the ball, and men, no longer having light of the golden ball, shall pray to the gods no more, who having no worship, shall be no more the gods. These things be hidden even from the gods.